Hello, and I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to revisit today something I wrote when I was in college that was published in the College Literary Journal. This was in 2011, and so I was a sophomore in college. And the piece is called The Pitch. And I wanted to read it and sort of like talk through the ideas that I see coming up as we go. Which will be interesting because it's a long time ago, and so some of this will just be my interpretation today. Some will be vague memory of what my intentions might have been. But I thought this would be rewarding because I took this out and reread it not long ago, and I thought it was quite profound in terms of its spiritual intuition. I didn't have a spiritual identity as a sophomore in college. I was really a materialist atheist, I would say, at that time. But in this piece, I'm feeling into truths which are now more apparent or more evidenced to me. And I feel like I can infer that, I can feel that coming forth in this writing. So yeah, I thought it would be interesting and illuminating, mostly for me, to just sort of tease out those things as I read through this piece. Also, you can probably hear my dishwasher in the background, but so it is. So again, this piece is called The Pitch, and I'll read it probably paragraph by paragraph, and then after each paragraph, I'll address some of what I see coming up in that paragraph. When I was young and I used to play expansive games of tag, I would imagine hiding spots so good, so utterly inaccessible, that were I to find them, I would put an immediate end to the sport. I truly believed there were places that couldn't be seen, just as I truly believed gravity failed to nab at the astronauts walking the orbital trail. But as I got older, I was forced to abandon such dreamy antics and thought, for like the rest, I grew more together and more worldly instead of away. If you don't believe me, you should try yourself to grow alone. With that pursuit come the voices in the head, the loudest and least patient company on the planet. So a few things here. One, this initial idea about playing tag and finding hiding spots in which one cannot be found or seen. To me, this symbolizes this fantasy of privacy, which will come up later in the piece. It's like, there is a place, a space for my soul or mind that nothing else can access. And explicitly, this is set up as a fantasy, as something that is going to be debunked. There's that, and then there's this idea, and a lot of my writing at this time, I would write more literally now. I wouldn't try to, shroud things in poetic language, but I feel at this time that's often what I was doing. But this notion that as we grow up, necessarily we grow together and more worldly, to me what that is saying is we actually are such social creatures that we can't survive without company and without a social identity. And when it says, with the pursuit of growing alone come the voices in the head, the loudest and least patient company on the planet, it means if you try to attain this fantasy of privacy, of being separate from others, you will go insane. So therefore it's impossible. I'll continue. Anyway, I was going to tell you of my shift in understanding, that which came with adulthood. Gravity, I learned, was ubiquitous, and this meant that neither the men in white suits nor their toy satellites could float, that instead they fell strategically, fell like the whole of this cosmic swirl we call the universe falls today. The state of existence, it seems, is best described as thrown into a hopeless somersault, and this, of course, would explain why, with the advent of maturity, I found myself thrust into a warm heap of fellow actors, panting on the open stage. So there's a lot going on in this paragraph, metaphorically. Again, we have these notions of childhood versus adulthood and mature versus naive understandings. And in the same way that the narrator initially believed there was this possibility of total aloneness or privacy, and later gave up that notion. They believed that floating in space was a consequence of that there were places free from gravity in the universe. That in space one was no longer subject to the kinds of forces we find on Earth. And instead, this person discovered that everything in space is falling in some sense. It's only that with its proximity to a celestial body like the Earth, it falls more rapidly and more tightly around that sphere. And so here I was calling on my understanding of physics from high school. Maybe it's incorrect, but that is, again, a poetic way of expressing this sense of the bubble bursting. And I thought there was some sort of magic, a place where you could escape gravity, and actually there's not. When it says the state of existence is best described as thrown into a hopeless somersault, to me this is calling upon Heidegger's notion of thrownness, which is a very existential concept. It's like we are in life without meaning, and it's up to us to figure out or create the meaning. And I found myself thrust into a warm heap of fellow actors, panting on the open stage. So it's a collective thrownness. We're all here together. The magic I believed in my youth doesn't seem to be founded, and it's up to us to decide what this all means. Were we to perform, we wondered, and was there a script? Surely there was, and if not, there had been. Or maybe each of us carried an edition of the thing in our pockets and wrote and then followed by day the morning's routine. Regardless, the text blossomed in predictable fashion, in the pyramid style of the old journalists. A heading and a crisis involving the big names and key players, and then a trailing denouement. Facts and details and second chances crammed into the mouths of the men and women who came after. Those who numbered so high that in trying to attribute meaning to the piece, they gave up and called it nihilism. Now, to me, this paragraph signals my reading of postmodern literature and theory at this time. So, not only is the piece invoking Heideggerian thrownness, but there's also this idea that the great age of literature, of history, is past. And those of us now who are in this space, the warm heap of fellow actors, all we are doing is regurgitating what came before. So it's a denouement, it's after the headlines, and facts and details and second chances, like these like errata that don't really, that aren't inherently interesting. And people gave up and called it nihilism. So it's furthering this dark thread in the piece of the hopelessness around the debunking of the narrator's original theory of gravity, where now this person has ceased to believe in meaning. This person has not, but their contemporaries are ceasing to believe in meaning of this whole project, whatever it is we're doing. It was an absurdist venture, no doubt, even a pointless foray, but there was color in the mania. This I noticed more and more in each terse and ineffable brush with my companions. The irises of their eyes were like their bodies, like the rough, granular texture of the walls and the streets composing our set. They hinted at all that was inarguably visible, the result of the chemical reaction that had once split a cauldron in two. And then there was the portion of the eye that had me stuttering in fear, complicating my lines when naked phrases would have sufficed. For to me, pupils appeared empty, as expressionless as the faces of the crowd we conceived beyond the lights. They were holes to be filled with labels and preconceptions and then heated to solidify. And though they had been purported to offer views into young souls, I saw in them only vacancy. Only a couple things to touch on here, because it's really just extending the same thematic elements, the same through lines, and we haven't yet gotten to the emotional turn in the piece, the epiphany. This idea there was color in the mania, that's the part that's highlighted as an excerpt in this publication, so the editor thought that was an important line as well. That's suggesting that even if this project, whatever is going on, is meaningless, it's still colorful, it's still beautiful. And that's going to come up later in a redemptive way. So this person is understanding maybe reality doesn't need to bear meaning in a way the mind can comprehend, and it's still worthwhile. That's kind of a hypothesis at this moment. The other notion, which will be dwelled on more, is about the two elements, the two dimensions of the eye. So there's the iris, which obviously bears color, and then there's the pupil, which appears empty. And the pupil terrifies the narrator because if there's a possibility of connection or meaning, it must lie in the pupil, since the eye is the window to the soul. And this person sees the pupil as empty. Therefore, he, she, I don't know, the narrator is never given a gender, is thinking, okay, this is an empty existence, and this is further evidence of it. What else was I going to mention on that node? Oh, it goes back to, it almost confirms this idea of privacy that was introduced in the very beginning of the piece. You know, this idea that there's a space within me, I can get away from others and hide. And this person is like, I've looked inside and there seems to be nothing there. So that privacy is impossible, but it's no longer even desirable. It's the person wishes that he saw something other than vacancy in the pupil. So, though they had been purported to offer views into young souls, I saw in them only vacancy. That was until I first loved one different from myself. It happened not as required by a scene, but rather off to the side, in anticipation of my turn to exhibit a participatory foul. There were worries of inadequacy in that groping darkness, stupefying, stilling recognitions of unity. The pupil, I suddenly understood, had never been and would never be lacking. Like the endless space that kindled the aspirations of the moon travelers, it was black, and yet more suffused with starlight than one could imagine. So this is the epiphany I gestured at a moment ago. I love that it happens not as required by a scene, but off to the side. This is a theme just in life in general, that our salvation is often not in the places we're looking. This character is studying other people intently to figure out where meaning or connection might reside. And instead, while waiting to do something, the meaning sort of comes to the character as an epiphany, as I've mentioned twice now. This person realizes that the black space that appears empty to us, in fact, is rife with light, just that is not immediately visible to the eye. And this realization is an offering of faith, which is going to clarify the true nature of the universe, that it's not an empty venture, that there is something redolent and intentional here. So it's sort of turning on its head all of these images that have been used so far to hypothesize emptiness, the images of hide and seek or of gravity. This is the moment where the person realizes, oh, actually what appears empty is full. And that means that not only is connection possible, but it's unavoidable. I'll go on. The emptiness itself had been my fiction, all of ours, I think. Life I now saw as one seamless portrait, one work of art, and this meant also a connecting device. For everyone has heard that no matter how the painter clings to anonymity, his voracious fans wait to pry the fingers from his cold mastery after he's died, and through it meet the lonely man. So this too is like, I could put it much more simply now with my spiritual language about things, but this is my fledgling way of articulating these matters from the framework of an English major and one who spent most of his time reading, fiction and philosophy and hadn't really dabbled in spirituality yet. But life I now saw as one seamless portrait. This is sort of a vision of, I don't know the exact term for it, but in Buddhism and just in other legacies of, meditators, people with mystical experience, we eventually realize that the self is an illusion and all objects flow together in a oneness. Once this narrator realizes that spaces of emptiness are a fiction, they know that there is a single substance pervading the universe. So that's what that expresses. These lines about no matter how the painter clings to anonymity, people are waiting to pry the fingers from his cold mastery after he's died. It means, again, it's that notion of privacy or hide and seek. The public is always wanting to excavate the artist's meaning. And this narrator realizes, now that I know that there is no such thing as absence in the universe, everything is beaming with light, there is no way for the intention to be hidden in the first place. It's like the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. Like the art speaks its own meaning and provides a continuous message with the creator. Like the art is the creator's meaning in a way. Our religions had never dealt in this way. Forever they'd sent us to the same sculptor as judge at our passings, or worse yet, to the same body of consciousness from which we had strayed. Scenarios simple as these had us walking dilly-dally back to the homestead in fear of broaching the so-called void. But all I wanted was to move in a straight line to and through the end of my life. It was a mess of things, sure, bunched and swollen with the gift of predestined meaning and laughing irreverently at a goof called time. But in it all I now saw a fine pair of governing forces. One the incendiary swing of the arm in which we had always dabbled, and the other the rolled bushel of smoke lain like a glaze upon the catcher's mitt. So the first few lines I quite like because they're embedding possible religious answers to the question of the void, to the question of emptiness, which is really the question of mortality. Our religions had never dealt in this way. Forever they'd sent us to the same sculptor as judge at our passings. That means we meet our maker afterwards, such as in Christianity or Judaism. Or worse yet, to the same body of consciousness from which we had strayed. So this is more of like a Hindu vision of what awaits us in the afterlife. Scenarios simple as these had us walking dilly-dally back to the homestead in fear of broaching the so-called void. The person is saying that these religious responses or offerings indicate a fear of the emptiness that this person has been investigating throughout this piece. But all I wanted was to move in a straight line to and through the end of my life. This person has realized there is nothing to fear in the emptiness because the emptiness is not actually empty. This line, I would like to say, is also very Nietzschean, and I read and was highly influenced by Nietzsche at this time. So this idea of the eternal return or the amor fati, and there's a video on my channel where I do a reading from Nietzsche and talk in greater length about these concepts. But this idea of and again, it goes back to Heidegger too. Heidegger talks about turning toward death. It's like I'm going to face the void without fear, and I don't need there to be any greater meaning within it. It can be empty, and that's okay. So that's what this person is expressing. It's an existential bravery. I don't know what to make of the final image. One, the incendiary swing of the arm in which we had always dabbled. The other, the rolled bushel of smoke laying like a glaze upon the catcher's mitt. Except, of course, it's a reference to a pitch. And the idea is that the universe has been thrown, which is language that is used before. We are thrown, we are randomly here, and must make up the meaning. There's also the idea, which came up in the beginning, of gravity sort of rolling things in the same way that, the ball leaves the mitt. And of course, a pitch is also an idea we express to someone else, usually looking for a agreement or investment. And so this entire piece could be characterized as a pitch of that sort also. Swimming in the oils dried and set, one had only turned the key to happiness with conviction. One had only to accept his role, but this entailed that a role be in the first place acceptable, that no maid undergo subjection to a master unless she be given also the prescient smile revealing her capacity for rebellion, that no child tinker in the corner ignored by his parents, that no man perish before speaking his lines in the third and most dazzling act, her messages once truncated wither and die for good. I wondered if the others knew what I knew, and I wondered, more pressingly, how any person who hadn't seen the beauty and its consequence could be trusted to lead us. So this paragraph, which is the ending, gets into something that I touched on in my very first video in this channel, which is peace, love, and peace, love, and the purpose of existence, which is that after we have a profound spiritual realization and we grasp the nature of existence, some sort of political ramification is necessary. Otherwise, we haven't fully integrated this knowledge. That is, we're going to want to help others. We're going to want to make reality conform to an ideal in some way, because we're full of love and understanding, and it must express from us. So this person realizes first, swimming in the oils dried and set, that means understanding that life is this work of art, and I am a piece of that art flowing outward. One had only turned the key to happiness with conviction. That is to say, the solution to my anxiety, the cessation of my anxiety, will be found in understanding and living my purpose. It's as simple as that. But this entailed that a role be in the first place acceptable. And the person goes into some examples. And that is to say, just because we know that the cessation of anxiety lies in purpose, doesn't mean that every person already has an equal shot at purpose. And so we need to lift the barriers that might reside in the world to prevent people from purpose, to prevent people from that flourishing. And yeah, at the very end, I wondered most pressingly how any person who hadn't seen the beauty and its consequence could be trusted to lead us. So this piece early on introduced this notion of thrownness. All these actors are together looking for meaning. And this person recognizes now, okay, we need someone to show us the way forward, but I'm not going to trust anyone who hasn't grasped the realizations that I have in this piece, who hasn't seen that life is art, that emptiness is a fiction, that we are all in it together inextricably, and that we are all looking for purpose, right? That these barriers need to be lifted so we can find purpose. So that's the ending of this emission, this pitch. Reading it now, many years later, like almost 15 years later, an irony, of course, is it ends with this narrator who's so perceptive and so inquisitive, saying like, boy, I wonder who's going to lead us. And this narrator should be the leader, right? Sort of like Toni Morrison said, if there is a novel you want to read and no one has written it, then you must write it. This person is wondering who's going to come and save me, but clearly all the tools are in their possession. So yeah, that's one irony which floats above the piece that I probably wasn't aware of when I wrote it. Anyway, that was just as fun for me to go through all of that as I thought it might be. And yeah, it really just confirms for me that even if there are different ways we express things at different junctures in our lives, we really, all of us do have, Milan Kundera said this, he said people have themes, writers have themes with variation. Musicians, composers do as well. They express the same few things throughout their lives. They have a song. And this piece, although articulated in, this covert, poetic, academic language that was my milieu at that age is striking at the very same realizations or truths that through this channel I've expressed in the language of spirituality. So because I can probably never summarize it succinctly for the rest of my life, I may sing my song. So thank you very much for listening to this rendition of the song, and I hope you have a blessed day. Goodbye.